going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Discoveries in Faith podcast. Before we get started today, I did want to mention that I am really loving the traffic that the YouTube channel has been getting. The Discoveries, it's at Discoveries in Faith Pod on YouTube. Been getting some good traction. If you want more Discoveries in Faith content and the monthly podcasts, like let's say you want more short form, kind of video essay style content, that's where you can go to the Discoveries in Faith YouTube channel. I also post this podcast. It's not in a video format. There is sort of a visual element to it, but it's not like my face or anything, so don't worry. But the podcast is also on the YouTube channel as well. So I just wanted to plug that quick for those of you who are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything like that. I love all the platforms that people have discovered this podcast on. And yeah, what's the next thing? Happy Easter, everyone. This is a few days after Easter. This is being recorded on April 8th, Wednesday, April 8th. So Easter was a couple days ago. Really didn't have a ton of stuff come out around Easter. I really just spent the time focusing on being with my family and being at the church. And it was a wonderful time. I had a great Easter. And yeah. So because of that, I was a little late in my annual viewing of The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson epic. And it's become somewhat of a tradition for me the last couple of years to view The Passion of the Christ. And I watched it last night. Originally, I tried to record this episode last night, and that movie is such a tough watch. It's really heavy. I don't think that particular episode came out super well, to be honest. So I just thought, let's just take a day to gather my thoughts. I wasn't like super emotional, but I just didn't have a lot to say because there's not much to say after you view the film. I've taken a day to gather my thoughts, and yeah, there's always something. I've seen this movie not as many times as even other films. I only watch it once a year, but I would say maybe 4 times. Yeah, that sounds about right. 4 or 5 times. And yeah, it never gets easier, to be honest. It's very heavy subject matter, but the theme or the topic of this episode of the podcast is I think that The Passion of the Christ, the Mel Gibson film, is the best Christian film of all time. And really, I think it's the best piece of Christian art to come out in the 21st century. I think, in the last 26 years of us being in this century, really film has become the new kind of high medium. And to be honest, in my opinion, there aren't a ton of great Christian films out there. I think the best recent example of Christian film would be the series The Chosen. That's widely popular. And I think The Chosen is great. I think I might be in the minority in that I don't think The Chosen is like mind-blowing, to be honest. It is good. And it portrays, and I know that's going to cause a lot of people to like freak out, but I think, and Jonathan Rumi does do a good job of portraying Jesus. We're going to get into that in this episode, but the Chosen is good. It's very good, not like great. I'm sorry. I think it is good. I'm glad that it exists. I support it. It's not my favorite Christian film, but it's one of my favorites. I think The Passion of the Christ really, in my mind and heart, they're almost, you can't even compare them, to be honest. And I do feel like they're trying to achieve different things, and we're going to get into that. But yeah, that's my hot take is The Chosen's good, not great. The Passion of the Christ is great. So yeah, that's the statement to lead off the top of this episode. And it all starts with the performance of Jim Caviezel as Jesus. In my opinion, it's still, now obviously we kind of know why this movie didn't get a ton of awards buzz, but Jim Caviezel didn't even get nominated for an Academy Award when this came out. And that is the ultimate snub. And that's kind of when a lot, I think, me personally, you start to lose respect for, and it was a controversial film at the time. and a religiously charged film, but other religious films have come out that, have gotten the attention. But it was a highly controversial film. A lot of organizations didn't really want to dip their toe into it. The film itself was nominated for like best makeup, I think best original score, some of the little ones, but like best direction didn't get that. Best picture didn't get that nod either. But that's besides the point. It really, awards don't matter. It's the achievement of the film. And Jim Caviezel is the center as Jesus. And I still think he's probably the best portrayal of Jesus on film. I don't even want to compare him. Because I think Jonathan Rumi, what he's doing is fantastic as well. And he's doing it different. And I think he's doing it very well. But to me, I mean, I grew up watching Jim Caviezel play Jesus in The Passion. And to me, that was always the ultimate like portrayal of Jesus, and like how I in my relationship with Christ and how I imagine it to be, like he gets the closest to me. So it centers around him. And obviously it's different because in a show like The Chosen, we're getting all the miracles and all these different situations that Jesus finds himself in. And obviously we haven't seen The Passion yet. We haven't seen the Good Friday season yet. That's going to be coming out later this year. And I'm very excited for that, those episodes to come out just to see how Rumi tackles it, because, maybe it's because Caviezel tackled probably the event in Jesus's life that in my head would be the most difficult to portray, and he did it well. And Rumi, he hasn't even had the chance to do that. I don't know. And I'm sure he'll do great. He is a fantastic actor. Also, I recently learned he's like 50 years old. Man, Jonathan Rumi looks really good for his early 50s. He looks like, I thought he was like 30. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I found a lot of people I know a lot of priests who don't seem to age either. I think Catholicism is a route to just being youthful. I don't know. That's kind of my little theory there. So Jim Caviezel, this role changed him both from a professional standpoint and a personal standpoint. He spent many years being quite private after the film released and really not doing a lot, mostly doing smaller, low budget Christian movies. The Sound of Freedom was a film that came out, I want to say a year or two ago. It was probably the next big film that he was in that is about a guy that I haven't even seen it, but he breaks up like a human trafficking ring. And that was a huge controversial film. I remember it's a movie I've been wanting to watch for a while, but yeah, apparently he was in that and it was controversial, and that kind of brought him back into the fold. And then he kind of came out and was on a lot of podcasts, and he got to talk more about filming The Passion of the Christ. He was struck by lightning while he was hanging on the cross. He got his shoulder dislocated. He got hypothermia, and he had to have 2 heart surgeries in his life post filming The Passion of the Christ. He actually did a good amount of suffering in making this film. And, he's still, and you can tell even today, 20 years later, when he talks about it, you can tell he's just a changed person. And he talks about just the spiritual journey that portraying Jesus in this film was for him. And it's hard because when you hear things like that, number one, you see the product on screen, and then you hear about what he went through. It's so powerful. And then, of course, you have Maya Morgenstern, I think that's her name, playing Mary. And I love how Mary is portrayed in this film. And Mary could have gone... I think Mary could have been done a disservice in one of 2 ways, and The Passion doesn't do either of them. The first one is she's a background character and barely has any screen time, and she's kind of just she's there, but she's not really doing much. That could have easily been how it was portrayed. And the other one could have been Mary is like this over the top, like she's taking away the spotlight from Jesus, or like she's overly portrayed as overly divine. Now, obviously, I'm Catholic, and so I believe in the divinity of Mary, and I say the Hail Mary, and I pray to Mary, and I ask Mary to pray for me and my loved ones. And so Mary is obviously very important to Catholics, and obviously that's one of the things that non-Catholics have against the Catholic Church is Mary. I don't even want to get into that, but the Mary is just portrayed so beautifully in this film as just, I mean, the way, and her name's Morgenstern, Maya Morgenstern. I think it's Maya. It's either Mia or Maya. The funny thing about this movie is there's pretty much no big name actors in this film, and this film didn't like kick off anyone's career in a major way. I mean, I know that the lady that plays Mary Magdalene was in like The Matrix and a few other things. So I know she was a bigger actress, but I don't think anyone other than Mel Gibson directing it, being one of the biggest names in Hollywood at the time, there's not really a lot of like AAA crazy stars in the film. And Jim Caviezel was kind of like on the upswing. And he talks about how he like had just purchased a Lamborghini when he got The Passion, and he knew that like, it was going to be a controversial film and it would affect his career. And so he was on the up and up, and he had been in a lot of critically acclaimed films up until then. He was becoming this like highly regarded actor, and then The Passion in many ways kind of stunted his growth in the industry. But Morgenstern as Mary, just it's so beautiful, especially the final shot that we see with her holding Jesus's body, and it's like a 1-for-1 recreation of the statue in the Vatican, the Pieta, which is a statue in the Vatican of Mary holding Jesus, and even where her hand placement on it, like on his chest, and like she has the open palm kind of at the bottom, like it was very obvious the direction was strike the pose of that statue in the Vatican. And it's so beautifully done. And it's kind of a subtle nod to Christian art. But she looks straight into the camera, like straight into the eyes of the audience. Like, this was you. Like, he did this for you. And that's the last scene we get, and the camera's pulling back, and it's just her staring into the camera. It's just such a beautiful shot. And then the third performance, there's great performances all over. I think part of what makes this movie so strong is there isn't a single moment where I'm like, that was a little melodramatic, or where it takes me out of it. I know some people talk about the Roman disciplinaries, the people that actually torture Jesus in the most controversial scene of the whole film, are a little too like they're barking at each other and acting like very barbaric. And to me, it's like, if that's your job is to brutally like torture people, like I don't think you'd be super like pompous and like, like I don't think that you wouldn't. I'm pretty sure they would be acting like that. It was just a different time. It was an ancient time. And so that never took me out of the movie. In fact, and it's supposed to be, this is the worst of humanity. This is humans at our worst, and for Mel to kind of, to make that sort of, give us that image of like, and even like Barabbas, when Barabbas comes out, the murderer that the angry mob takes instead, and they set him free instead of Jesus. Like, he's like, okay, he's got like a big scar in his eye, and he's just like, very like messed up. And then you look at the crowd, and there's a lot of people with like deformed faces. I really think Mel Gibson did that intentionally. Like, okay, was everyone walking around Jerusalem at that point like these deformed, like demonic looking creatures? Probably not, but the mob was meant to represent the worst and the corruption of humans. And so it's kind of subtle, but like almost, if you pay attention, like almost every single person, every single extra in the mob is just like all kind of like they have like some sort of feature that's kind of messed up, like they got like a crooked eye or, a big scar or something. And I think that was intentional. And so that never took me out of the film. And to me, it adds to it. But anyways, the third performance I want to talk about is his name is Luca Lionello, the actor that plays Judas. And I wanted to highlight him. I want to highlight Luca because Judas is such a underrated, like complex character. He's the one that he betrays Jesus. He's the one that gives up his location so that the Pharisees can find him. And wow. And he's only in the first, I would say, third of the film, and then he infamously he hangs himself, and that's a pretty brutal scene too. And we're going to get into like kind of that scene and how that scene was done, but the way the regret and the pain in his eyes after he sees Jesus, like he doesn't even live to see Jesus's like his crucifixion, his main beatings, but to see him get taken is and manhandled and chained up, and there's a scene where the mob has like found they're transporting Jesus from the Garden of Gethsemane, and he's all chained up, and they kind of like throw him over a bridge. They're like messing with him, and they throw him over a bridge, and Jesus is kind of like, oh, and he kind of falls, and you see Judas like under the bridge, kind of like hiding, and then Jesus looks at him, and it's like, okay, what's going on? And then they pull Jesus back up, and Judas is under the bridge, and then you see a flash of a demon like kind of scratch at Judas, and it's just like the way that they portray, and we're gonna get into this at the end. The way that they portray like demons in this film is kind of interesting, and how it's just like these like very like at first they appear like these innocent creatures, and then they just become crazy looking, and it's frightening, to be honest. It's very frightening because it feels very real, and it feels very plausible, to be honest. So yeah, Luca Lionello, he always struck me as like just you can really feel his pain and his regret and the complex emotions of him giving up Jesus. I'll never forget the scene where the Pharisees throw the bag of 30 shekels, and he drops them, and he's just desperate to pick them up, and it's a very low moment for him, right? And it's just done so well. So obviously every performance in the film is fantastic, but those are the three that always stick out to me as Jim Caviezel, Maya, and Luca as Jesus, Mary, and Judas. I think that they're fantastic. Even Pontius Pilate, I don't even know the actor's name, but he always, it's like you took Pontius Pilate straight out of my imagination and plopped him on screen. It's always incredible to me how everyone just fills their role incredibly well. And of course, this is all underlined by Mel Gibson's incredible direction, and he really is the mastermind, and he is a genius. And embarrassingly enough, I've never seen Braveheart. I've never seen a lot of the movies that he's been in. I just know him for The Passion primarily. I know him for he's been in some other movies. He was in a movie called what's that movie called with Mark Wahlberg? He's in a lot of movies with Mark Wahlberg, but it was Father Stu, that movie from a couple years ago. I thought he did okay in there. He's kind of like this. I think he plays Mark Wahlberg's dad, and he's kind of like a drunk, and he's an archetype in that movie for sure, like kind of the deadbeat dad. I think he's his dad. Yeah, 99. That just came to me, but that movie was like, I've watched that movie years ago. And he's in some other films, but he's incredible in this, and he's not acting in it, but he's directing in it, and his vision is superb. It really is. And of course, one of the primary reasons why I wanted to do the review this year is because the sequel to The Passion of the Christ, after what will be like 23 years, the resurrection. He's going to be coming out with the resurrection story next year. I think around Easter time is when it's supposed to come out. And I'm obviously highly anticipating that. I think it's going to be fantastic. He recast Jesus. And at first he was talking about, because he was on Joe Rogan's podcast last year, he was talking about how he's going to use Jim Caviezel again. I'm like, that's so awesome. He's like, we're going to de-age him. I'm like, perfect. Like, I think that technology has come a long ways to where they could make it work. And then Caviezel is back into that role. And for some reason, since then, they've decided not to do that. And they've decided to recast Jesus. I don't know if that's because Caviezel backed out or Mel had a change of heart or what happened, but that's a little disappointing. But, another person is, I'm sure I trust him to pick a great actor to play Jesus, but Caviezel, so, I mean, it does seem like he went into a dark place, and I wonder if part of him was like, do I want to go through all that again? I mean, it literally, like, the role literally almost killed me when I did it back in 2004, and you're 20 years older, and you've had 2 heart surgeries, and it's a lot. So I don't know if that's the case, but maybe that's what happened. Okay. So that is coming out next year, and he's talked a little bit about it, and he wants to depict like Jesus, him descending into hell over the 3 days. We don't have a lot of like scripture on what happened there. So we're going to get his vision of hell. I'm sure it's going to be haunting. I'm sure it's going to be terrifying. I'm sure it's going to be just like the Passion, where I'm just like, just speechless afterwards. And I'm both dreading it and excited for it, because it also gets to be happy because it's Jesus's return and his resurrection. I mean, that should be a happy film. It should be happier than the Passion, but there's some dark subject matter before that. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see if we can get through that. And of course, Mel does stray a little bit away from strictly what we hear in the Gospels in a good way. Like he takes some artistic license. I think everything he does is fantastic. Number one, the floating cross. I don't believe, and I could be getting something wrong here, I don't believe that's described in the Gospels. Is when Jesus is nailed to the cross, at one point they have to flip him over for some reason. I forget. And they're flipping him over, and you think Jesus is about to land face first and like get crushed by this cross that he's nailed to, but then it like stops. It's like whoom, it's like hovering. I don't think that's ever. I think that was Mel adding that in there, which is like fine. I mean, that's there's a good moment where Mary Magdalene kind of like stops crying, and it's like, what the, what's going on here? He's still performing miracles. So there's that scene. The way he portrays Satan is pretty interesting. And that Satan is like this kind of androgynous, sort of like bald. I think it's played by a woman, but she's meant to, you can't really tell. And the voice of Satan is like, oh, it's like real. It's like both beautiful and so evil at the same time. And it's really like it's perfect because she's got like that guttural kind of tone. I'm pretty sure it's a woman. I hope it's I really hope I'm not getting this wrong. Let me, again, not that matters. Who plays give me 1 second. Is that Claudia? Is that? I'm sorry, guys. I think that's the. Oh no, she plays Pontius Pilate's wife. Never mind. Plays Satan in the Passion. Oh God, goodness, her pictures just came up. Rosalinda Silencio. Okay, so that's a female. Yeah, she's got those eyes, man. She does such a good job. So yeah, it's like not like he could have gone traditional, with like the she's a beautiful actress. Like he could have gone traditional where it's like the red horns and the crazy looking monster, but obviously Satan, like it should be kind of alluring in a way, you know, and I could say it, like and he is or she is or whatever. It's like this beautiful, like bald and just like haunting looking creature, and then the voice is like they used auto tune to like make her voice sound kind of crazy, and it's both like alluring but scary. It's perfect. Again, it's perfect. So yeah, so Mel Gibson goes a little bit off. Like that's his vision. He has Jesus stomps the head of the snake in the beginning. I think that was a little like that is was symbolic. I don't know if that necessarily happens in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then the demon children, the way he portrays demons and how they the demons that are messing with Judas and ultimately kind of drive him to commit suicide, which is there's some interesting symbology there in that scene, brutal, haunting scene. Because what happens is, I'll start from the beginning. Judas is like crying because he just saw Jesus get taken away, and these kids kind of come up to him, and at first they look like normal kids, and they're just like, "Hey, Mister, why are you crying?" And they're kind of like bugging him, like kids do. And it's such a beautiful, because Jesus loves children, and Jesus is constantly in the Gospels talking about how to protect children. So children are just so dear to Jesus, and so again, it's kind of like it's the inverse. Like everything that God has, Satan has the cheap copy of it, right? And so, of course, they would appear as children, and then they keep bugging Judas, and then you start to see like their faces get all messed up. And all of a sudden they become more and more corrupted, and you can tell they're like demons that are bugging him. And then they like drive him out into the desert, and he sees a tree, and then he sees a dead donkey, and there's a rope kind of around the donkey and the donkey corpse. I don't think that was placed by accident. Donkeys represent like sinners in the Bible, because donkeys are they're like the opposite of sheep, where sheep are very they follow the shepherd. They're very obedient, whereas donkeys aren't, and donkeys just kind of sit in place. We're talking about this at Bible study one night. And so donkeys kind of represent like the worst of humans, is like they're the opposite of sheep. I just did a terrible job of explaining it, but donkeys have historically been in the Bible like a representation of sin. And so the fact that he pulls a rope off of a dead donkey is just dripping in symbology to me. And then he hangs himself with the donkey rope. So yeah, I mean, Mel does insert a few things in there that are not, but you have to, because part of my problem with movies that portray like events in the Bible is sometimes they are so like lock in step. Like we cannot portray anything outside the Gospels, that they come off as very dry, because they can't, there's no room for expression or artistic expression. And Mel Gibson gives himself that room for artistic expression without like going off the rails and becoming something that's just not theologically honest. I think of movies like when Willem Dafoe played Jesus in The Last Temptation of Christ, where Jesus is like very lustful and actually a sinful person. And then he gets crucified. And by the way, the crucifixion scene in that is like, compare the Passion, it's almost hilarious, because Willem Dafoe is playing Jesus, and there's like, it looks like someone took like a red paintbrush and flicked some red paint on his chest. And that's like the beating that he took. It's like not even close to the Passion of the Christ, which is obviously an R-rated film that's like uber violent. But yeah, so like, I think Mel found just a perfect balance of it's very faithful to the Gospels, and where he does take artistic license, it makes sense, and it doesn't take you out of the film at all. Okay, I feel like I'm reviewing the movie, and it's like, who hasn't seen The Passion? But I'm just going over like why this is the best Christian film of all time. It's in fact, to me it is. And that leads us to like The Chosen, The Passion and The Chosen, which I think The Chosen is really becoming, The Passion at the time of its release was the highest grossing R-rated film of all time. It was incredibly popular. I was 5 years old when The Passion came out, so I don't really particularly remember it, but I've looked at old news footage and things like that, and gone back to see it and what the reactions were. And of course, you can look at like the data of just how much money the movie made, and it was incredibly popular. And so, of course, next year, 2027 is going to be an incredible year for Christian media because we're going to get The Chosen depicting the Passion, and then the long-awaited sequel to Mel Gibson's Passion, The Resurrection of the Christ. And so Easter next year is going to be like I'm going to be plopped down the theater watching all this stuff, and I'm so excited. So, when it comes to Caviezel and Rumi, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into the difference there. Caviezel is still the ultimate portrayal of Jesus. And I don't even want to say one is better than the other, but I do have a favorite. And I can't lie, I have a favorite. Caviezel's my favorite. And a lot of people have grown very attached to the Jonathan Rumi Jesus because we've had 5 seasons now to really get to know him. And he does come off as highly relatable and just kind of humorous at times, and he does a good job portraying the soft, kind heart of Jesus. And in The Passion, 95% of the movie, Jesus is getting crucified, getting beaten, so he's not going to be super happy there. But then in some of the flashback scenes, he comes off as very stoic, but it's all appropriate because we have a flashback of him telling Peter at the Last Supper that Peter will deny him 3 times. We have him at the Last Supper. We have little clips of the Sermon on the Mount. There is one scene. It's one of my favorite scenes because it's a flashback that Mary has right before, in the beginning of the movie, and it's Jesus is building a wooden table, and he has an interaction with Mary, and they have a little joking interaction. And Caviezel is so playful and funny in that scene, and he's splashing Mary in the face with water, and it's perfect. It's just that little bit of humor that we can see. That is what he was like, before all these events. Like, he was just this beyond joyous, kind, humorous, pleasant person who was incredibly wise. And it's like, I imagine, like Caviezel had that in him to have that portrayal of Jesus. And Rumi is like the first 5 seasons of The Chosen is like that, 2-minute clip in The Passion where Jesus and Mary are like having a normal kind of interaction. And that was also kind of added in, that's not something that was necessarily described in scripture like that. It was just like a random little moment. I mean, we obviously know that he was a carpenter and that Mary was his mother and things like that, but so good. And yeah, the friendly and relatable Jesus is just perfect. So we get all of it in The Passion. We really do. And what can other films learn about this? And I think it goes back to kind of what I said a little bit ago, is faithful adaptations, but bring the artistry and take that 1% of flair and add it, And I think a lot of movies lose that, and they lose the reality of the fact that, the biggest controversy surrounding The Passion is just how violent it is. And it's funny because Hollywood has embraced violent films forever. Look at Quentin Tarantino. He's like one of the highest grossing directors of all time. His movies are incredibly violent. Look at any horror slasher film that's come out, and no one has an issue with that. And yeah, The Passion is particularly long and drawn out, but I think it also draws out an uncomfortable sensibility in a lot of people because it was almost universally loved by Christians, and then the secular kind of society was like, ugh, and they said some nasty things, and they made some nasty accusations about Christians, almost like fetishizing the love for the film, and that's so unfair because I don't watch The Passion of the Christ for entertainment. I watch it as almost a visual prayer. It's a visual Stations of the Cross. And I didn't even mention this. The whole movie is in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew. There's not a single uttered word of English in the entire movie. And so I've always watched it with subtitles. One of these years, I'm going to turn the subtitles off and just be there. I'm going to do that one of these years, especially because I've watched it several times now. I just want to turn the subtitles off because to me, that just brings you in so much more is when they're speaking the actual language of the time. And so that was kind of, that's part of what made it so powerful to, not just Catholic Christians all over the world, because it felt so real. It felt so raw. It felt like nothing extra was added. In fact, we have an artifact like the Shroud of Turin, which personally, I believe that is a burial cloth of Jesus. I've seen enough evidence to confidently, my belief is that is the cloth. But the Shroud of Turin is, I think Jesus is scourged, we estimate about over 700 times if we count the lashings on the Shroud of Turin. Over 700 lashings. And it's like half of that in the Passion. So imagine, as brutal and violent as that movie is, and I'm sorry for families watching that we have to describe these things, but it's important. It's about half of what he actually went through. It's about half. There's scripture that says that, that Jesus, when he was stripped of his clothing, you couldn't tell whether he was a man or a woman. He was being so bad. You can obviously, know what that means. Like there wasn't a single inch of his body that was reserved. Everything took on, every piece of him took on the weight of our sins. And for that to be portrayed and to bring us to the edge of what's manageable is perfect. And it's a visual prayer to me. And I can barely get through the movie. It's the only movie I cannot eat. I cannot eat. I cannot drink. I love to snack during movies. I love to snack while I'm watching live sports and things like that. I cannot consume anything when watching The Passion. I'm just there. And it's 2 hours and 6 minutes. And it's almost like I go under anesthesia and I come back out. There's no bathroom breaks, no pausing, no nothing. It's just there. And so for many of us, it has become a visual prayer. It's a visual station of the cross. As humans, we're very visual creatures. And so it really just hits home with a lot of us. And so, yeah, it was always a controversial film, but I think it's absolutely perfect. It's pretty much the only, film I've ever seen where I wouldn't change a single frame. It's perfect. And so, I want to say it's my favorite movie of all time, but I hate watching it. So I have a weird relationship with this film. I only want to watch it once a year. I don't want to watch, I've never sat down and said, oh, let's watch The Passion. That's never once. It's like getting ready for a marathon. When you're running the marathon, it hurts, but then when you finish it, you're glad that you're in it, And that's what watching The Passion is to me. All right, I think we've officially topped over. Yeah, this is about to be one of the longest episodes of the Discoveries in Faith podcast. What are your guys' thoughts? Again, this is going to be available on all kinds of platforms. What are your thoughts on this? Is there anything I missed? Is there anything that you want to say about what makes this film so great? Leave it down below. And yeah, I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter. And I have nothing more to ask you to ask you guys. I really enjoyed recording this episode to get my thoughts out there. And of course, until next time, this is Jacob signing out of the Discoveries in Faith podcast. Have a wonderful week, everybody.